Welcome to Cybersecurity Where You Are, the Center for Internet Security's podcast. I'm Sean Atkinson, CISO at CIS.
And I'm Tony Sager, Senior Vice President and Chief Evangelist at CIS. Cybersecurity affects us all, whether we're online at home, managing a company, supporting clients, or running a state or local government.
So join us on Wednesdays as we discuss trends and threats, explore security best practices, and interview experts in the industry.
Together, we'll clarify these issues, creating confidence in the connected world.
Hello and welcome to the show, Cybersecurity Where You Are. I'm Sean Atkinson, CISO here at the Center for Internet Security, joined by the host with the most, the Hall of Famer, the difference maker, Mr. Tony Sager. Tony, how are you, sir?
Hey, Sean. Great to be back.
Fantastic. We're joined by a very special guest, Chair of the Risk Committee here at CIS and part of the Board of Directors, Mr. Chris Painter. Chris, how are you, sir?
Hey, good to be here with you guys.
Fantastic. Great to have you back. And Chris, we've been doing what we call the CISO translation series. And why we asked you to be here was when the CISO is talking to a risk committee, a board, it is what's the type of vernacular they should use? Is it highly technical? Is it trying to convey certain messages, or is it trying to be the CISO that cried wolf and trying to get budget and attention and things of that nature? So we wanted to get your opinion on what is a good strategy in this space. So now, Chris, when you walk into a board, a risk committee, and you've done this really worldwide in terms of understanding security policy and what it means to the nation and really internationally. What's the single biggest, I would say, translation failure that you've seen CISOs, potentially myself, make? And why does it happen so reliably? We see that CISOs potentially are missing the mark when they're trying to communicate to boards or risk committees. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, look, I think this is a problem that we've seen for years, and it's not just limited to CISOs and boards. It's more the technical community and the policy community, or people, or the business community, even the C-suite of places, actually communicating on the same level and understanding each other. I wouldn't say any of this is about you. I mean, CIS is a different kind of organization. The board is largely pretty cyber savvy, so even if you say something technical, they either get it or they'll figure it out. So I don't think you evidence this in any way. But I think typically what happens is the CISO is used to talking in terms of technology, in terms of failures of technology, in terms of risk that really is very technology based and very technically based. And those terms are great and they're important, especially when talking to other people in your team. Less important when you're talking, or less salient when you're talking to the people on the board, when you're talking to the C-suite generally, when you're talking in the government to senior managers and policy people like the Attorney General or the Secretary of State or someone like that, who don't live in that world and don't understand that world. Now, there's two schools of thought that I've heard about this over the years. One of them is wrong, which is, there are some people I've run into, and some people I really respect, and I ran into in government, and said, as long as we mystify it, they'll let us do whatever we want. As long as we talk in these technical terms, it sounds like, I don't know what to do about this. This sounds terrible. Go fix it. You guys go off and do something. That may have worked for a short period of time when people are like, this is a big deal, I don't know how to deal with it, I'll give you resources, etc. But what happens in the long term, it doesn't, because what it means is those policymakers and those people in boards don't adopt this, don't own this as a real problem. They outsource it to the CISO and the technical team. And that means they don't really take it as seriously as they need to. They don't resource it the way they need to. And they don't look at it, which they really need to do, in the panoply of all the other risks they're facing. And so I think that's a challenge. And I think, so when and I remember we had, I think like 10 years ago now at DEF CON or Black Hat or one of those places, there was a whole pre-meeting of CISOs and how to talk to boards. So this is, again, not new, not gotten significantly better, but not new. And I think it really is, what do those people need to do? What resonates with them? And it's really not the technical. I mean, you want to couch it in some of the technology so they understand you know what you're talking about. But then really explain it to them as if they didn't know anything about this, to really put it in their terms. And for boards particularly, and risk committees, it is what is the business risk? What is the real challenge here? I'll give you one story that happened to me, which is when I was in government. DHS, Department of Homeland Security, has run from time immemorial these cyberstorm exercises,
Mhm.
and I was a co-chair of something called the National Cyber Response Coordination Group, the NCRCP. Flows flowingly off your tongue. Now superseded by other organizations, and I co-chaired it when I was at DOJ with someone from DHS, senior person at DHS, and a senior person at DOD, and we'd go through this exercise. And one of the injects in the exercise is a certificate was compromised. Major certificate. It was really important. But the people who were briefing us on that inject, the technical people, it didn't really make the case of why this is a big deal. And basically, I said at one point during that session, why do I care? Why is it I care about this? I mean, I understand you care about it. Why should I and the other people in this room care? And that's really what I think a CISO should think about, and also what the board should think about when you come in.
Well, I could sense Sean's disappointment when you explained that the blank check theory of CISO is not a winner.
Wouldn't work for him anyway, because it's a pretty savvy organization in CIS.
Yeah,
so,
that's right. Yeah. Sean
you'd have to
data.
you'd have to move it up to like a quantum level to confuse people.
There we go.
Exactly. Ever feel like cybersecurity is a giant jigsaw puzzle and someone forgot to give you the corner pieces?
Or the box lid, the table, or the time.
Exactly. That's where the CIS Secure Suite platform comes in.
It's your intuitive starting point for cybersecurity. One dashboard with the functionality of Syscat Pro dashboard and CIS CSET Pro built in.
From policy to implementation, it puts the puzzle together for you. CIS controls? Check. CIS benchmarks? Double check.
And it's built for CIS Secure Suite members. You're getting a streamlined experience with the guidance that turns data into decisions.
Like seeing where your biggest risks are and knowing exactly what to do next. Share results easily with internal security teams from one great tool.
Plus, it helps you align with frameworks like NIST and ISO, making you audit ready.
Whether you're a small team or a cyber underdog, the platform gives you the visibility, clarity, and confidence to act.
So if you're ready to stop guessing and start securing, visit cisecurity.org/securesuite to learn more.
CIS Secure Suite Platform. Cybersecurity simplified. But this notion, I remember the early days, as you referenced, Krista, like every cyber tech conference had how to speak to boards, had a paneler or a track or whatever, and then business conferences I went to had what every executive should know about cyber and attacks and so forth, and we've tried to treat it as kind of a translation problem. We just need to learn about the others and speak the language, but it seems a little more complicated because what you described was like trade space. A dollar spent here is a dollar not spent there. And therefore you need some basis for comparison. I mean, is the right answer to quantify, to put everything in financial fiduciary terms?
If you can, yeah. I mean, I think that's what boards are. Boards are mostly concerned with financial risk. Not all boards, and there's other kinds of risk, reputational risk, other things that come in. For an organization like CIS, a major cyber incident would not just have financial risk; it would have reputational risk, for instance, given what our business, and true for other sort of cybersecurity companies too. So I think it is quantifying it in a way they can understand it. Now, challenge is certainly it's not that easy to quantify cyber vulnerabilities. I mean, there's the old adage about you don't know what you prevented. You don't celebrate what you prevented because you don't know what you prevented. When we had Y2K back in the day, we spent lots and lots of money. Nothing bad happened. Planes weren't falling from the sky like when that Nike commercial. Nothing happened that people thought was going to happen. But on the other hand, nothing happened, and that's good. And so that's proving a non-event doesn't really resonate with boards, I think. But I do think if you can quantify it, and I think too, unfortunately, a recent development in terms of frequency and severity has helped this, which is ransomware, where before, look, boards for time immemorial have been hit by industrial espionage, by states, by non-state actors. It's a big deal. But they don't see the intellectual property walking out of the room, so it's very hard for them to quantify something that could be monetized in 2 or 3 years. Their research and development may be gone, but they're not going to realize it right away until the adversary, the other company, starts producing their product or incorporating their technology. So ransomware, though, I think changed the game, and really something I hate to say take advantage of. It's the never waste a good crisis. Um, Changed the game because then CEOs and C-suites saw, oh, this is business disruption. This is something I understand. This is something that I get, and I understand how that's going to impact the business. And I think that's an opportunity for CISOs to say, yeah, this is not the only thing that does that. This is not the only thing that has impact, but let's use this as an example of how you need to prepare and why this is something that needs to be appropriately resourced and accounted for, not just resourced, accounted for as a risk against your profits, et cetera.
Completely agree. And I think going through that simulation, we've done tabletop exercises together, Chris, and I think one of the things that I get from that is to see decision making from that strategic level, because it really helps affect, well, how should I be thinking strategically? One, not only to communicate those types of threats and activities, but also that decision making process, because it helps that translation by being able to think, as it were, like a board member. What are the types of questions that are going to be asked, or
Yep.
what information is needed to make a decision in that space? I think that's extremely important. I love the fact that you brought that up, because it then helps us, right, to create the playing field, as it were. And in some cases, Chris, you've mentioned it, I'm a little spoiled, right? I don't have to do a lot of translation because I can say it, and yeah, we understand exactly what you're saying, and here's how to move forward. Fantastic. But for others, I think that simulation makes a lot of sense. Does that make sense?
I think it does too. I think it totally does. I think the challenge there is getting the board to set aside the time to do it, because boards are incredibly busy. They have lots of other obligations. They have lots of obligations just as board members. So to say, okay, especially for a major company, we need to set aside some time to go through this. And some people look at tabletop exercise like, oh, this just seems like a game. Why am I doing this? But they are incredibly helpful for that. We even there's a national level exercise every year. It's usually Chembio or something like that that goes up to the president, and they have actually a fake cabinet meeting with the president presiding at the end. And we did cyber one time when I was still in the government, and that was essentially a long-term, very complicated tabletop that ended with essentially a board meeting, the National Security Council and the president. Um, and I really do think there were lots of lessons learned from that. And there are every time these boards put on one of these things, because they either understand some of the shortcomings of the processes, understand the shortcomings of the communication process between the technical team. One of the best practices that were talked about, Tony, in those seminars even years ago, is the CISO should be part of the C-suite. Should be like, you shouldn't have them report through the CIO, or the CTO. They should be right there. And that's happened in some places, but not others. So, that may be a best practice, but that still means you have to communicate even if you're at that level. And I think having these tabletops, and realistic ones too, because I've always kind of railed against, I won't name any big consulting companies, but big consulting companies that do a tabletop that is so complicated that everything breaks and it doesn't test anything. And they're very clever and like, oh, we did all these things. That's not what a tabletop should test. A tabletop should be something that people can learn from. So it doesn't mean, have everything go wrong and life as we know it ends. It means like figuring out key things that might require decisions. You could do ransomware, you could do others that are probable, would have a high impact, and then it really tests that communication and preparedness path. Something else we've talked to companies about for years, I know you guys have too, is having incident response plans in place before they get hit with an incident. Shouldn't be building the plane as you're flying it, as we always say. And that started to happen. But another way to test those and make sure they're working is to again exercise it. Because if you think about it, a major cyber incident, it's you guys, the CISO talking to the CEO and the board. It is the public relations people. How are you going to message this, right? How are you going to talk about this? It's the lawyers. How are you going to talk to regulators and others about this? There's multiple parts that need to be synchronized in a way that I think that most companies don't until they're actually hit with something.
Yeah, having been, you know, having been around military organizations for most of my federal time, this exercise, re-exercise, to the point of exhaustion. But there is a certain muscle memory that comes with that.
There is.
Done well, then you wind up sort of asking yourself all the questions that need to be asked, right? And finding those things like, what they used to say, during a cyber incident is the worst time to get acquainted with your general counsel.
Yeah, exactly.
Head of comms. That should have been worked through as a normal part of this.
Or for speaking as a recovering lawyer, for a general counsel to get familiar with the problem, because lawyers are by nature a little more risk averse, and if they don't know the subject, they may not give the best advice if they haven't worked through with the implications, and that includes reporting and everything else that's around it. So I also, you're quite right. The military does this exquisitely, right? Except for this. I've noticed in some military exercises over the years that cyber becomes so hard in a general integrated exercise. They say, well, let's just assume the cyber aside, because it's too hard for us. Well, so you can't afford to do that.
Yeah. If you remember, that's exactly the story of, you remember the famous eligible receiver, 97, right? Which was the first. Before that, there was this tendency to say, we're moving expensive, dangerous things around, right? Ships and oh my God, that cyber stuff is just a mess. Let's put that aside and worry about another day. But that was the wake up call in the world that I was in at the time, which was there was some real leadership at the top senior level to say, if this happened to us, it'll happen, in real life and to anyone like us, right? And there was a tendency before that to kind of hide all that, to say, but we're doing the important stuff, and that cyber stuff is just kind of a distraction. But it became like, no, we better bring this out in the open and talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the other thing that as you do exercises for boards or tabletops for boards, they don't have to be pure cyber exercises. They can be a broader. So it's even more effective, I think, if the board sees how cyber plays into a larger either incident or situation, so they understand it's integrated. Because I think what we've all been saying for years is, look, cyber is important. We care about cyber. We're cyber guys. We care about cyber. But cyber is not distinct from the rest of the world. I mean, it has to be integrated, in governments, it's national security and economic security, in companies as part of the larger risk matrix, and also and as part of the opportunities that you're looking at. And if the longer you treat cyber as this little boutique item over here that is the province of the CISO and no one else, then boards are never going to get familiar with it. It has to really be, you have to start thinking about this as not this technical, scary thing, but something that they can understand. That goes back to your first question, Sean, put it in terms of financial risk. But, boards deal with risk all the time. I mean, this is not new to them. They just don't know how to deal with this one, or they haven't been taught how to deal with this one.
Chris, just so because of the nature of technology, right, there's been a lot of work over decades. I used to track this stuff for different models of security and insecurity, and things like probability of occurrence and
impact,
technology. Yeah, and is that helpful? Because it's often comes from a mathematical basis or sort of a model, and models are good for what they're good. But is that consistent with the way boards take in and make decisions, or is it complementary? Or
I think it's complementary. I wouldn't focus as much on the math necessarily in terms of, but in part there are risk modeling things that apply to the physical world and have forever, right? There's,
sure.
For instance, if I'm a company that makes medicine, I factor in, my chances of getting sued, of liability, of negligence. I mean, I factor all that in. Is it a precise science? No, you can't guess completely. But I think, coming up with some models and the idea of, one of the easy ones is what's a low probability but high impact versus a high probability, low impact, and what do you really care about in that spectrum? I think that helps boards think about it too. That it's like, look, I'm telling you that this particular thing is unlikely to happen, but if it happens, we're dead. So I think that, and then I think they can understand those terms, and I think the CISO can also estimate the probability of something happening based upon the investment and based upon the technology they're seeing out there, or today, based upon, and this is harder because AI is moving so fast, and especially what we've just seen with some of the AI sponsored attacks when they escape. You know, it's hard to it's a little harder to do that risk analysis. On the one hand, if you want to be Machiavellian about it, that might scare boards and saying, "Well, we're really, really screwed now. We need to do something."
Back to that blank check theory.
Yeah.
Okay, Sean's listening.
But on the other hand, I think that becomes an equilibrium over time. I think that these AI discovery tools will absolutely play a huge role in privileging the bad guys and the people trying to exploit systems in the short term. But over time, I think that balances out. But it's important to invest in the balancing out by having the capabilities to fight those attacks.
Yeah, I like the way you framed it. Right, I used to have a team that focused on these models, and if you remember a fault tree analysis,
Yeah.
I think it originally came out of nuclear weapons and things, but every bad thing that could happen, and then you sort of back up all the events, and they would have experts gather and everyone estimate the probabilities at every node. It's like a big complicated thing. And I once sat down with a team and I said, boy, I tell you one thing. I appreciate all the work you're doing, but I wouldn't give you a nickel for the probabilities that you came up with. But the value was that they enumerated all the possibilities, right? Based on the experience of a lot of really smart people, and being able to say something, not get hung up in the math, as you said, or the precision, but to say, these are low likelihood things, but I mean, the consequences off the charts.
Yeah.
We have to think about these, and vice versa, is really, I think, an important discussion. And you want to have the whole picture in front of you.
Yeah, it's also demonstrating those consequences. So in other words, if you just go in and say, if this happens, like everything's gone, we're in deep water, that doesn't have as much impact. You say, well, here, and if you could tie it to other examples, and that's not always that easy. If you could say, okay, this company got hit, this is what happened to this company. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you're looking at it, some of the companies that have been hit, their stock goes down, and they come back up again. So it's harder to say to a board, hey, but they lose customer confidence. There are other metrics to look at that I think can make a difference. And it is hard to predict. I just saw this movie last night, Pressure. Do you know this movie? It's about the planning for D-Day. It's a weather movie. It's all about this guy, this British meteorologist, and forecasting for D-Day, and how they were going to invade and they decided not to invade because the weather wasn't going to be good. But one meteorologist saying it was going to be great, and the other one said no, it's not. Looking at the different indicators, that's why I said this kind of prediction happens in the physical world all the time. And you can never be 100% precise. I mean, no one's ever 100% precise or accurate, but you can make some good estimations of this is what the impact will be. This is some of the challenges we're facing, and this is some of the things that, in a way that's cost effective, we need to do to bite that. I mean, if you just say, I want all the tools and all the money, they're going to tell you to get out of town. They have to operate too, and they have to make money if they're a company that, a public company or not, a traded company. So you have to say, okay, well, here is what's reasonable. And the other thing that's happened, and John and Tony, this, is although it's still in its early stages, I mean, the SEC and others have been more, and FTC and others have been, and European regulators have been a little more vocal about having some cybersecurity expertise and understanding and talking about cyber risk. Now, it's still a little wishy-washy about what's a material incident or not, but still, I think that's changing the game to some extent. I think I think some cyber people wanted the rule from the SEC that every board had to have a cybersecurity person on it, which didn't quite happen. But it did say that you have to have understanding of these issues. You can't just ignore them. And I think there's more appetite and understanding in boards now than there used to be because of that. And because, quite frankly, they read the paper too. I mean, they see these big incidents happen, and they see, particularly around ransomware, again, business disruption, they kind of get, okay, this is something I have to worry about. This is on my plate of things I need to figure out.
Exactly right. I took the words right out of my mouth. It's become, the cyber risk really is a business risk. It's integrated really into many, many practices and processes within an organization. And it's interesting the way you phrase it, because when you see that, it's what was the adage? We don't want to be on the front of the New York Times, right? In terms of an incident, those types of things. And it's, as we start to see that, it's interesting the feedback, we get from a CISO perspective as to, are we vulnerable to this? Could this happen to us? And it's yes, it could. let's go through this. Get me up to speed on where we are. The question: are we safe? Are we protected from this? It is that's an interesting analysis and process.
Yeah.
Because I also think it's what's in the domain, Chris, as well, that gets the attention, and so it should. We've, as you mentioned, agent escape and doing some very interesting capabilities. That's a whole nother podcast, but that is gives us an opportunity to get back that seat at the table, or at least the attention in some cases, for that 5 minutes, as it were. Because, like you say, boards, high-level executive leadership, very busy, a lot of responsibility, a lot of things, and that they need to understand and compute, as it were, as part of their decision making during the day. But getting that attention is always good. And I think those, the way I frame it as well, Chris, is that's kind of like the elevator pitch. Is you've got this discrete amount of time. Convey to me why I should care and what we're doing to protect ourselves, or what you need to get us to answer that question positively. Are we safe? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, it does. I don't think it works to talk in technical terms about that. Again, coming back to that, or in product terms, like we have X firewall, we have X software to protect us. I don't think that resonates with them unless they're really familiar with that particular product. I think it's like we're taking the following things to both prevent this and, importantly, to mitigate it if it happens, right? So part of this is some things are maybe unavoidable or will happen. The metric can't be, and you guys know this too. This has long been true. The metric can't be that if something goes wrong, when nothing goes wrong, everything is great. You're great. And when something goes wrong, the CISO loses their job. That can't be the metric. It can't be a binary metric. So I think it's really, and also, in fairness, describing to them that the risk is still there, but you're mitigating it, just like you mitigate other risks, right? So that they understand that this is not a binary thing, but you're doing everything within the resources that are appropriated to make sure that this is handled, and you're also looking at the new issues that are coming down. I'll give you, one example that I'm concerned about a bit is I think if you go to every boardroom around the country or maybe around the world, everyone wants to embrace AI. It's like, oh, AI, we need AI. They don't necessarily know why they need AI, but they want AI. But I would bet that the percentage of those boards that say, oh, and we also need to secure the AI. We need actually, we need to have cybersecurity, not just generally, but also to secure from prompt injections, all the other things that can happen to AI when you have AI and you're relying on AI for critical parts of your business. And that demand curve needs to catch up. And I think that's something CISOs can educate a little bit about, saying, look, great, AI, wonderful, good, go with God. But, here are the additional exposure that you get from employing these high level models. And here are some suggestions of how you can mitigate that so something doesn't go wrong. Because that could cause all the, financial damage, reputational damage, et cetera.
Absolutely. Well, I think in that space, and a really good topic, Chris, because when we look at AI, in some cases, the acceleration to get there, and then it's coming back to, like you say, the CISO and say, well, are we secure? I don't know. I think so. This is so new. It's moving so fast.
Or it's a third-party product. It's
exactly.
This is true.
Yeah.
This is not just true in cyber, but your supply chain also has something to do with whether you can say you're secure. And if you don't own your supply chain, and no company really does, or many don't, you have to then vouch for all the products you have in the supply chain that they're there, and that gets more complicated as these new products come on tap.
Absolutely. Well, even with AI, and we've seen a number of organizations, Chris, outsource their AI development. So now it's not just a prime part of the supply chain; it's all the other components, right, that are now contributive, and that just you're just spreading the risk really across many different organizations, and then you're trying to find out from a governance perspective, well, how what's if we input our data into the system, where's it go? Where's it stored? What countries? These types of things, and you start to lose that effect, and the confidence in the answer starts to from the vendor starts to, well, I think, and whenever I hear I think, it becomes
it means I don't know, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. I think that's right. And that will sort itself more over time too, because the market will help drive that. But right now, I think that's still up in the air a lot of times. And I think, one thing I'd recommend for CISOs especially, is it wouldn't be bad if your company will help fund it, or even sometimes if they don't, to take some of these trainings that are given for directors. There's lots of things out there. There's NACD. There's a bunch of groups out there that do director training. So you can kind of get a feel for what a director is being asked to do, not what a CISO is being asked to do, but what a director is being asked to do, and that helps you think about what language is going to be most effective when you talk to them. And basically, the bottom line there is plain language, plain words. Don't try to overwhelm folks with the technology. Have the data to back it up, to be sure, because if they ask, then it's like, okay, I can show you.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I think, Tony, as Chris mentioned earlier, whenever we talk about the technical elements, I always think of you calling out the wizardry, right? Everything we do back here, it's all magic. You don't need to know it. It just happens. Leave us alone. Just give us the money, right? Give us the people and the money and leave us alone.
Yeah.
It always resonates me when that comes up.
Chris, one of the things I observed in the Defense Department was the again, people that get to those really senior jobs, right? Stars on their shoulders and stuff. These are extraordinary people. They're decisive. They're they're hard charging and so forth. But as IT became kind of foundational to everything the department did, what I saw was people who didn't grow up in IT, didn't have what I call decision intuition. Yet, in their normal domain, right? And the language is, can I project force, right, with confidence, or things like that. They have a pretty strong sense of when they hear a good argument, a weak argument, their intuition is tuned because that's their world. And then this IT stuff, and it's like they're trying to map it to what they know. And sometimes that works, but a lot of times it doesn't. And they struggle with that, right? And so you get in this, so the commander says, can I confidently project force? And the IT guy goes, I don't know. We don't have all the IAVAs in place, and we got 1 million scans in the last one. That doesn't help, right? That gives no intuition, and that's observing that. So will things get better as we all become more conversant?
Yeah, I think they already have, and I think they'll get better. I mean, it used to be. I used to use the analogy of, someone goes into, like, a cabinet secretary in the U.S. and they start talking about cyber, and their eyes roll back in the back of their heads, and they kind of run screaming from the room because it's like, I don't know this, I don't understand. When they deal with nuclear technology all the time, right? You don't have to be a coder to understand the geopolitical issues or the business issues around cyber. It just has to be explained to you in those terms. And you raised it, going back to this movie I saw last night. General Eisenhower was demanding this meteorologist, I don't want you to tell me how this is all working. I want you to tell me where the high pressure zones are. Go or no go.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly. And it's a little unfair because you can't be categorical, right? So, but at the same time, you can give certain levels of certainty, and that's why I think boards.
Yeah, because it turns out, I used to tell the story of I don't know if you knew this, my dad was an Army sergeant, supply sergeant, and what I learned from that was there's always uncertainty or fog in the system, because he said to me one time, he said, well, the inspector is coming, right, to see all the equipment that he's responsible for. He says, so I have to take all the equipment that's not on the books, load it in a deuce and a half, a big truck, and send it for a drive through the gun range while the inspector's here. Because if I don't have that stuff, I have nothing to trade with the other supply sergeants for the stuff that they've lost. And the decision intuition there is that, and by the way, the commander knows this, right? There's no perfect inventory of hardware, software, or military equipment. But we know that, when we say the planes are ready to fly, that doesn't mean literally every plane is at 100% ready to go, completely fueled. It means that we have enough experience to know that I can make a rational, though imperfect, decision. We haven't got to that stage.
And I do think it's getting better. I mean, it's gone from people being afraid of the technology. I mean, there are exceptions. Like, I remember when I was at DOJ, Janet Reno cared deeply about cybercrime. I mean, she way ahead of her time. I mean, she used to grill incoming from other countries, South Africa and other places. What are you doing about cybercrime? And they'd be like, So so that there were people like that, but most of the folks were just, I don't know, I don't care, it's magic to me, or it's like too complicated. But that has changed. I think people understand it more because it's more in the public eye. People understand the damage it causes, either financial damages or infrastructure damages, or even human toll. I mean, there's a lot of work around the actual human costs of a lot of these incidents. A friend of mine's working on that, and so. I think there's more understanding. It's it perfect yet? No, there's still this bubble, I think, of cyber, but I think it's getting better, and it will continue to get better as we have more generational shift and people just grew up with this stuff. Not that everyone who grew up with it understands security either, because lots don't. To be fair,
That's very true. Well, Chris, that brings us to the end of the episode. Thank you so much. Again, really looking from your lens and really valuable in order to understand the types of communication, how to communicate. And we even got, I think, a movie recommendation, Pressure, with Brendan Fraser, I think, is in that one. So
is he? I'm not sure. It's actually, I think he is actually. You're right. I think he plays Eisenhower. It's 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 an interesting movie. I can't say it's a total mystery because you know what happens, but
right.
But it's a pretty interesting take, which I haven't seen before. And I should just say, Sean, been a pleasure to be on, but also both Sean and Tony, you guys are you're models of this. I think you understand. No, you are. I think you understand it, and I think you've learned this over the years of how to communicate in a way that I think people take it seriously and understand it, including people who don't know this issue. And I think that needs to be replicated a millionfold. I mean, you have lots more people out there who can do that. I understand it's hard. I'll be in Las Vegas for DEF CON, and that I think they've gotten better in talking to the policy community. There's a policy track there, for instance. But it's always been a problem, and it's not just a cyber versus business or policy thing. This goes to other areas too. But I think cyber can really use a lot more of the translators and building better translators and people to do it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Chris. I really appreciate it. And Tony, thank you, sir. Fantastic episode.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you to our audience. Make sure to subscribe in all the usual ways through your preferred podcast provider. Catch us on YouTube at The CI Security. If you have a question, comment, please reach out to us at podcast@cisecurity.org. And with that, we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the podcast today.
The thoughts and opinions expressed by our podcast guests are solely theirs and do not necessarily reflect those of CIS.
Tune in on Wednesdays for a new episode. And in the meantime, visit our website at CISecurity.org.
Together, we'll continue our efforts of creating confidence in the connected world.